The Moon. In 1972, the crew of Apollo 17 were the last humans to walk on the surface. They stayed 3 days in this lunar world, sleeping out among the stars. And with this, these astronauts are part of a very small group who have had the opportunity to stand on the moon and gaze back at our Earth. For in that moment, they were able to truly appreciate how distant and fragile Earth is, and how vast the heavens are around us. That is undeniably impressive, sure. But 3 days is not really long enough to call the moon home. Since 1972, we have only orbited the moon, photographed it, mapped it, sampled it, and studied it with immense curiosity, but only from afar. Since then, no human has gone back to the moon, much less to try to live. But that's about to change. Because this next chapter is not simply about exploration. It will be about settlement, about governance, about infrastructure, and eventually, it will be about dominance. For decades, the moon was a destination driven by curiosity. Now it is being reconsidered as something far more serious, the site of a permanent lunar base, perhaps even a future colony. What changed is not romance, it is physics, and what physics makes possible. Near the moon's south pole, in permanently shadowed craters, there is ice. From that water, hydrogen and oxygen can be extracted and turned into rocket fuel. This lunar fuel resource changes the calculus for the future. Let me explain. Right now, every deep space mission must carry every drop of fuel needed throughout the mission from Earth. Climbing out of Earth's gravity well consumes much of that fuel, making missions short-lived, expensive, and risky. But if fuel can be produced closer to where missions are staged, the economics shift, useful payload multiplies, and the limits of how far we can travel begin to expand exponentially. You see, the moon becomes less of a trophy and more of a logistical platform, because exploration simply plants flags, but infrastructure creates the real opportunity. Now, with this new lunar infrastructure, it would lower costs, increase mission frequency, reduce risk, increase payload, and normalize human presence beyond Earth. And once presence becomes normal, expansion accelerates. Recently, you may have noticed that there has also been a shift from occupy Mars to build on the moon first. Here is part of the rationale. Even with our most advanced spacecraft, reaching Mars takes months of travel through deep space. And launch windows to Mars are limited and occur only every 26 months, when Earth's and Mars's orbits align properly for an ideal intercept. Communication delays to Mars are measured in minutes, and it takes roughly 27 of them for a message to arrive from Mars to Earth. The Martian conditions are harsh. If something critical fails, help cannot arrive quickly. Whereas the moon is only a few days away. And communication is nearly real time.
Orbital parameters stable. Earthlink is green. Copy that. Lunar telemetry is nominal. Video conference is active. Earth command confirmed.
Equipment can be resupplied, repaired, or redesigned within days. So you see, the moon is now seen as the proving ground. If humanity cannot learn how to build and sustain a base on the moon, attempting to build a colony on Mars becomes exponentially more difficult and closes the door to anything more complex. So in that sense, the moon is not a distraction from Mars, but rather its preparation for it. And most importantly, it is a gateway to Mars and beyond. If the moon becomes the primary staging ground for deeper space missions, the first nation to establish a lasting presence does more than gain prestige. It chooses prime settlement sites. It positions itself near critical resources. It determines launch corridors. It sets the early pattern of expansion. And those decisions compound. Now this raises a larger question. Can a free enterprise, market-driven society like the United States build something permanent beyond Earth before a state-directed program like China does? Because those two systems are now moving toward the same objective, lunar permanence. China's approach to the moon follows its state-directed system. National goals are set at the leadership level. Agencies and state-aligned companies coordinate around those goals. Resources are assigned, timelines are protected, direction flows downward, and alignment by all is required to follow, regardless of desire. The advantage of this system is continuity and efficiency. If leadership decides that the moon matters, the effort continues regardless of popular sentiment, and it continues across decades until leadership decides to change course. Resources can be directed regardless of cost, and profit is not the primary constraint. The metric that matters most is execution and success. Conversely, the United States operates a good bit differently. It functions through a free enterprise, market-driven system. NASA sets objectives and standards, but execution flows through competition in the private sector. Companies pursue contracts, capital moves toward opportunity, engineers choose where to work. Progress emerges through rivalry, iteration, and incentive, not mandate. Historically, the United States has demonstrated an unmatched capacity for innovation, not only in theory and forecasting, but in turning bold ideas into working systems and then improving them quickly after failure. A free market system thrives on competition and rapid iteration. Since NASA's discontinuation of the shuttle program in 2011, it has leaned into private sector partnerships. Companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin have accelerated progress at a pace few predicted. But that system also has constraints. Here, progress depends on buy-in, on elections, on political stability, and on sustained long-term intent. Even in a free market system, projects of this scale are not run by millions of people. They are run by small groups, sometimes nearly by one individual, acting on behalf of everyone else. And those projects depend on funding. SpaceX and Blue Origin are not state-owned entities. They pursue contracts, seek profit, and operate within markets. Their long-term visions, building cities on Mars, lowering the cost of space access, must still survive investor scrutiny and political shifts. Ambition requires funding. Funding requires persuasion. And long-term sustainability requires lowering costs to the point where operations can survive. With this in mind, we can recognize that both systems ultimately want space activity to become normal, less like an expedition and more like a plane ride to a desirable and unique destination. The key difference is how that normalization is achieved. But building a colony requires more than innovation. It requires staying power through delays, through budget disputes, through leadership changes. So if expansion beyond Earth is going to define the next century, the system that proves it can build and sustain a colony will shape how that expansion unfolds. And now we return to the bigger picture. Two superpowers moving toward the same moon. One is trying to hold the lead, while the other is trying to take it. If the United States allows its off-world future to depend on one narrow path, one vehicle, one contractor, one political window, it risks being surpassed with surety. So if one program falls behind, another must advance. If one launch vehicle or program fails, another must be viable. If presidents change and the administration shifts priorities, the mission must survive. You see, this is not duplication. The system has simply evolved to protect itself against weakness. Now consider the harder scenario. What happens if China establishes a permanent lunar base first? Legally, no one owns the moon, but location matters. Some ridges receive near continuous sunlight, while some craters contain water ice. Some regions offer safer landing geometry, and others provide stronger communication alignment with Earth. It is important to note these areas are limited. If one coalition builds first in the most advantageous terrain, others will not be choosing from a blank map. That is not conquest. Rather, it is positioning for success and prosperity. Throughout history, and present in today's geopolitical environment, certain places matter not because they are owned, but because they sit along movement. Choke points like the Strait of Hormuz, the South China Sea, the Red Sea, the Panama Canal, even emerging Arctic sea routes near Greenland. These tight stricture points matter significantly because there is non-stop shipping and commerce traffic flowing through them. The space between Earth and the Moon, the transit corridor spacecraft must use, could become something similar. Not a battlefield, but rather a corridor. And corridors carry leverage. It is worth remembering that this is not the first time rival superpowers have competed in space. During the Cold War, a similarly ideological struggle, space briefly became common ground. In the 1970s, the United States and the Soviet Union signed formal cooperation agreements. The Apollo-Soyuz mission required shared protocols, shared engineering standards, and mutual trust, even at a moment of deep political tension. Space, at times, opened channels where politics could not. But that cooperation emerged from a very specific balance of power, a bipolar world with clearly defined spheres and mutual interest in stabilizing escalation. And today's competition is structured differently. Lunar infrastructure is not symbolic, it is strategic, tied to water extraction, launch corridors, communications control, and sustained logistics. With that in mind, infrastructure that shapes leverage is rarely shared between competitors. It is important to note that it is unlikely rival powers will merge infrastructure on the Moon. You see, the International Space Station was cooperative by design. However, China was purposefully excluded from participating. US legislation enacted in 2011 prohibited NASA from collaborating with China on space projects over national security concerns and fears of technology theft. So China built its own station, Tiangong, which operates independently and offers an alternative to countries that oppose US policy. A similar parallel structure on the Moon would not be surprising. Separate bases, separate supply chains, separate systems, and separate standards. And now, here is the deeper signal. Superpowers do not just collapse overnight. They lose ground when they stop proving they can build. For nearly a century, the United States has led nearly all major technological races. If China establishes a durable lunar base first, not symbolically but operationally, it reinforces a broader pattern. A pattern of manufacturing strength, of infrastructure expansion, the ability of long-term planning and coordination, the ability to execute at scale. All of these signals compound. When the world believes you can build, it aligns with you. Capital follows confidence. Alliances follow stability. The moon alone does not determine global power, but it reinforces perception. And perception shapes behavior. So, as the world's two most powerful nations compete for position beyond Earth, this is not just a space story, it is a leadership test. Who can coordinate? Who can sustain? Who can actually build a permanent home off this planet? Two civilizations. And just one moon. And this time, it's not about who plants the flag. It's about who calls it home first. You see, this is not rhetoric. It's simply proof. Proof that humanity can do it. Regardless of who gets there first, civilization is not just going for 3 days. It's going to stay. Humanity must find a way to stay in order to survive.